My twins need a mother, he pleaded at the station, taking his bride. A Christian story of second chances, faith, and forever after love. Snow drifted sideways across the Willow Creek train station, stinging the faces of travelers and whipping hats clean off the heads of anyone foolish enough to stand in the open. The platform boards groaned under the weight of slush, boots, and life's hurried footsteps. Lilian Hart stepped off the train with a shaky breath, pressing gloved hands to her chest. Her only possessions fit inside a small, worn valise: a Bible wrapped in a shawl, 2 sets of clothing, and a packet of letters that had changed her life. Letters from a widowed rancher who had begged for help but tried to sound brave while doing it. She whispered to herself, "Lord, if this is your path, steady my steps." The train's whistle wailed again and steam filled the air like a curtain. Through the white cloud she saw him. Caleb Turner. Taller than she expected. Shoulders broad from ranch work. Face tired, no, not tired, worn. Like a man who had spent too many nights awake, afraid his world might fall apart while he slept. The twins stood beside him. A little boy and girl around 4 years old, cheeks red from the cold, mittens mismatched. They clung to each other, and despite the chaos of the station, their eyes locked on Lilian with curiosity and hope. Lilian's step faltered. "They're only babies. Lord, give me the strength to love them well." Caleb spotted her and froze. For a moment he didn't move, as if unsure whether to run toward her or run away from the enormity of what he was asking. Then, he swallowed hard and walked forward, taking off his hat with trembling hands. "Miss Hart." His voice cracked. Lilian nodded. "Yes. And you're Mr. Turner." Up close, she could see grief lingering in the lines around his mouth. He looked like a man who had aged years and months. The twins huddled behind his coat, peeking at her shyly. The sight tugged something deep inside her chest. Caleb cleared his throat and went down on one knee, not as a proposal, not as romance, but as desperation clothed in humility. Words rushed out of him like water finally breaking through a dam. I ain't good with speeches. I don't got fancy promises. But my twins," his voice caught and he pressed a hand against his eyes. "They need a mother. They cry every night. I ain't making it on my own anymore." The wind howled, rattling the tin roof above them, but his voice carried strong despite it. "I'll work till my back breaks if I have to. I'll protect you, respect you, and give you a home that honors the Lord. Just, please don't change your mind." Lilian's breath trembled in the cold air. She had been rejected so many times, turned away by employers, mocked by suitors for being too plain, too gentle, too quiet. And yet here stood a man begging her not for beauty or charm, but for commitment. For nurturing. For presence. The station master paused in his work, watching with wide eyes. Travelers slowed. Some whispered. But Caleb didn't notice any of them. His whole world seemed to rely on her answer. Lilian knelt slightly so she would no longer tower over the quivering children. She brushed a strand of hair from the little girl's face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sarah," the girl whispered. "And you?" Lilian asked the boy. "Samuel." Their small voices were the softest plea of all. Lilian stood and met Caleb's eyes, stormy with fear, hope, and prayer. "I came because I believe God leads our steps," she said gently. "If He led me to this station, then I will not walk away." Caleb's shoulders shook with relief. The twins let go of his legs and ran straight into Lilian's coat, burying their faces against her. She staggered from the sudden hug, laughing through tears. Caleb rose slowly as if unsure he deserved such mercy. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," she replied softly. "We'll take it one day at a time." He nodded, covering his heart with one gloved hand. "One day at a time. That's all I can offer." As the noon train pulled away, steam billowing around them like heaven's breath, Lilian felt something warm settle in her chest. A conviction. A peace. A promise. This wasn't the ending of her old life. It was the beginning of the family she never dared dream she'd have. The wagon wheels crunched through the frozen dirt as Caleb drove Lilian and the twins toward the homestead. The cold bit through her coat, but she kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching the land stretch out before her. Rolling fields cloaked in winter, fence posts leaning like tired soldiers, and a lonely farmhouse standing against the wind. Caleb cleared his throat several times along the way, as if fighting the urge to say something but losing courage at the last moment. Lilian pretended not to notice, giving him space. It was clear he had spent many months speaking only to 2 small children, to livestock, and to God. When the wagon stopped, she took in the farmhouse more closely. White paint peeled from the boards and the porch sagged slightly in the middle. The windows were smudged with dust and loneliness. yet something about it felt hopeful. As if the home itself was holding its breath, waiting for laughter again. Caleb lifted the twins down before offering his hand to her. We don't have much," he murmured. "But it's warm inside." The door creaked open, releasing the scent of wood smoke, soap, and faint lavender, the ghost of a scent that once belonged to another woman. Inside, the house felt too tidy. Not in the way of careful homemaking, but in the way of someone who had cleaned without purpose just to keep busy. Everything was in its place, untouched. A photograph of a smiling young woman rested on the mantel. Her hair was pinned neatly, her eyes full of life. Lilian paused. "That's your wife." Caleb's voice turned gentle. "Margaret. She loved this home." He swallowed. "I ain't moved her things. Didn't feel right." "I understand," Lilian said softly, though her heart twisted. She wasn't here to erase a memory, only to help carry the weight left behind. The twins tugged Lilian into the kitchen, showing her the table, their little wooden toys, and the shelf where their cups were kept. Their enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the silence hanging over the walls. Caleb set down her valise. "You'll take the room at the end of the hall. Mine's across from it. For now." His face reddened slightly as he cleared his throat. For now meant we are strangers still. For now meant we'll trust God with the rest. Lilian nodded graciously. "Thank you." They ate supper together, stew slightly burned on the bottom but hearty. Caleb pushed his food around awkwardly, particularly when she complimented his seasoning. "Margaret taught me," he mumbled. Lilian smiled at the twins instead, sparing him the embarrassment he didn't deserve. After supper, the children climbed up on her lap. She read a psalm gently, the twins leaning against her shoulders as if they had known her forever. Caleb watched, elbow propped on the table, his gaze unreadable but softening. When she tucked the twins into bed, they clung to her hand. "Will you still be here in the mornin', Mama Lilian?" Sarah asked. The name, Mama, hit Lilian like warm light. She touched her forehead to Sarah's. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Caleb lingered in the hall as she stepped out of the children's room. "They've taken to you quick," he said quietly. "They haven't called anyone Mama since." He stopped, breath-catching. "I'm honored they trust me," she replied gently. They stood facing each other in the dim hallway, oil lamp flickering shadows across the walls. The air felt thick with unspoken fears and newly budding hope. Lilian whispered, "I prayed God would give me a place to belong." Caleb looked at the floor. "I prayed he'd send someone who wouldn't turn away from us." A flicker of connection, small but real, passed between them. Later, alone in her room, Lilian knelt beside her bed. "Lord, thank you for this home, even though it's unfamiliar. Help me bring light, not comparison. Help me honor the woman who came before me while becoming who these children need now." Across the hall, Caleb whispered his own prayer. "Father, I'm trying to do right by her. By Margaret. By the twins. But I'm scared I ain't enough. Help me lead this family the way you want." Both prayers drifted upward, meeting somewhere above the quiet farmhouse. In the silence and shadows of that first night, a fragile seed of family took root, still small, still trembling but alive. Sunday morning dawned with a pale sun peeking over the horizon, its light bouncing off frosted fence lines and the distant creek. Lilian rose early, hands trembling a little as she buttoned her dress. Caleb had asked gently the night before if she wanted to join them for church. "I'd like that," she'd whispered, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. It had been years since she'd entered a church without feeling eyes judging her clothes, her posture, her plainness. The ride into town was quiet. The twins chattered in the back of the wagon, but Caleb said little. Lilian sensed his tension and reached into her pocket, touching her small pocket Bible. "Lord, go before me." As they rolled into Willow Creek, heads turned. Women leaving the mercantile paused mid-step. A farmer leaned against his wagon, nudging his son. Two elderly ladies at the corner narrowed their eyes as they whispered behind gloved hands. Caleb stiffened, his jaw locking. Lilian kept her chin lifted, though she could feel heat creeping up her neck. When they reached the church steps, the whispers thickened, like a swarm of bees circling without stinging yet. "That must be her." She answered an I heard. Poor Margaret. Barely cold in her grave. Didn't think Caleb would replace her so soon. And with someone so ordinary. Lilian caught the last part. Her heart squeezed painfully. She stepped down from the wagon with as much grace as she could muster, smoothing her skirt with steady hands. Pastor Whitfield was the only one who approached with a genuine smile. "Brother Caleb, you brought company?" His warm eyes turned to Lilian. "Sister, welcome." We're blessed to have you here. Lilian felt tears pricking but blinked them back. Thank you, Pastor. Inside the church, the wooden pews creaked under shifting bodies as people subtly leaned away from her. The congregation that should have been a refuge instead felt like a courtroom, and she the accused. Caleb placed the twins between them, trying to offer her a buffer. Throughout the sermon, Lilian felt the weight of gazes. People stared not in curiosity but in condemnation. A widow replaced too quickly. A stranger filling another woman's shoes. A marriage forged from desperation instead of love. When the service ended, the real test began. During fellowship, the room hummed with conversations, none including her. Women offered greetings to Caleb, pats on the twins' heads, but Lilian received only brief glances or tight-lipped smiles. Finally, Miss Clara Fielding, the unofficial town critic, pulled Caleb aside, not realizing the thin walls carried sound. "Caleb Turner," she said, voice dripping with reprimand, "you can't just bring in a woman off a train and expect her to be mother to those children. Margaret was the heart of your home. This stranger isn't her. Nor will she ever be." Caleb's reply was low but firm. "I ain't a skin her to be Margaret. She's helpin' us. She's patient. She's gentle. That's more than most folks around here have been." Miss Clara huffed. "Your judgment's clouded by grief." "No," Caleb said sharply. "It's made clearer. I know what kindness looks like." Lilian froze where she stood, arms wrapped around herself, hearing every word. Caleb defending her, it warmed her deeply. But the sting of the town's rejection echoed louder. When Caleb returned to her, shame shadowed his face. "I'm sorry. They ain't meanin' to be cruel. Folks just, they loved Margaret." "So do you," Lilian replied softly. He looked startled, ashamed. "I'll always honor her memory. But that don't mean—" He paused, struggling to find the words. Lilian offered him a gentle smile. "You don't owe me explanations. Not yet." Her voice trembled only slightly. As they exited the church, a little girl ran up and tugged at Lilian's skirt. "You braided Sarah's hair?" "Yes," Lilian said gently. "My mama used to do my hair." The girl wasn't old enough to understand the cutting edge in her innocent observation. Her mother, standing nearby, quickly pulled her away. Outside, as the wagon rumbled toward home, the town disappearing behind them, Lilian stared at her folded hands. Caleb glanced her direction several times before speaking. "You didn't deserve the way they treated you." Lilian took a slow breath. "I didn't come to be accepted, Caleb. I came because God opened a door. If this is the road He's chosen, then I'll walk it, even if the road is rough." He swallowed hard. "You're stronger than you look." "Strength comes from Him," she replied. The twins leaned sleepily against her, oblivious to the world's cruelty. Their trust gave her a strange courage she hadn't known she possessed. And as the wagon rolled across the cold prairie, Lilian whispered inwardly, "Lord, give me grace to endure what others think. Let my life, not their words, prove your purpose." The rejection had stung, but it had not broken her. It had only deepened her resolve. The storm rolled in just after dusk, one of those violent prairie tempests that rattled the shutters and made the wind howl like a living creature. Lightning flashed across the sky, casting sharp, white shadows through the farmhouse windows. Lilian had just finished washing the supper dishes when she felt the atmosphere shift. The twins, already uneasy, clung to her skirt each time thunder shook the walls. Caleb was fixing a loose hinge on a cabinet door, but even he kept glancing nervously toward the small bedrooms. "Storm's worse than the last one," he murmured. "Twins never sleep easy when the sky turns mean." As if summoned by his words, a crack of thunder split the night, so loud it rattled the stovepipe. Then came the scream. 2 screams. Mama." Lilian dropped her dish towel and ran. She found Samuel and Sarah curled together in the corner of their room, their little faces streaked with tears, terror gripping their small bodies. Lightning illuminated the walls in harsh bursts, casting long, jagged shadows like clawed fingers reaching for them. Their cries weren't just fear of the storm, she realized. These were the cries of children who had lost a mother once, and feared losing another. "Oh, sweethearts," she breathed, falling to her knees and sweeping them into her arms. "It's all right. I'm here. I'm right here." They clung to her with such desperation that she nearly lost her balance. Samuel's fingers dug into her sleeve, and Sarah sobbed into her shoulder. Then another sound reached her, a hesitant step in the doorway. "Gulp." He stood there, chest rising and falling, eyes wet with something deeper than worry. In the dim light, Lilian saw him trembling, an emotion he rarely revealed. He whispered, voice raw, They used to wake like this after Margaret died. Screamin'. I didn't know how to help them. Lilian rocked the twins gently, murmuring Psalm 46 under her breath. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Their cries softened. Tiny hands unclenched. The storm outside still roared, but the storm inside the room began to quiet. Caleb took one unsteady step forward. You comfort them like, he swallowed, like an angel, or someone who's known sorrow. Lilian didn't look up at him yet, she kept steadying the children with her warmth. I know what it feels like to lose someone, she whispered. Maybe not in the same way as you. But I know the emptiness, the fear. A tear slid down Caleb's cheek, disappearing into the stubble on his jaw. 4 months, he said hoarsely, I've prayed for someone who could help them feel safe again. I tried, Lord knows I tried, but I ain't a mother. I ain't got the gentleness they need. That's not true, Lilian said softly. They feel safe with you. But every child needs more than strength. They need tenderness too. This time she looked up at him. He was standing not as a rancher, not as a man trying to hold his world together, but as a father carrying heartbreak in his hands, and afraid to hope. The twins quieted at last. Their small bodies sagged with exhaustion, breaths evening out. Lilian held them a bit longer, letting them fall fully into sleep before easing them onto their pillows. She tucked the quilt around their shoulders and rested a hand on each tiny chest, praying silently. Caleb watched her from the doorway, one hand gripping the frame as if steadying himself. Lilian, his voice broke in the middle, rough and vulnerable. I don't want you to feel like you're just a caretaker. I don't want this to be arrangement only. I don't know what God's doing, but... He stopped, struggling. She stood slowly, wiping one last tear from Sarah's cheek. Caleb's eyes tracked every gentle motion, his expression softening like thawed earth. Stepping closer, she lowered her voice so as not to wake the twins. Caleb, I don't feel like a caretaker. I feel called. And that's different. He blinked, startled. Called? To us. To this home. To these children. And maybe... Her breath caught. To you. If the Lord leads. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant rumble of thunder and the soft breathing of the sleeping twins. Caleb exhaled slowly, deeply, like a man releasing years of held-in grief. I've been afraid, he admitted quietly. Afraid of failing again. Afraid of dishonoring Margaret. Afraid I ain't worthy of another chance at a family. Lilian stepped within arm's reach of him. Caleb Turner, she whispered, eyes shining, God isn't in the business of second chances. He's in the business of new beginnings. He closed his eyes, the words hitting him like grace itself. When he opened them again, something had changed. Respect. Tenderness. Possibility. He nodded toward the hallway. Let me walk you to your room. She accepted his offered hand, not out of obligation but out of a new, growing trust. As they walked down the dim hall, the lamp flickered. The storm quieted outside as if heaven itself were exhaling. At her door, Caleb paused. Thank you, for tonight. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Thank God. He nodded, lingering a heartbeat longer before stepping back. When the door closed softly between them, both leaned against opposite sides of the wall, two hearts awakening to something they had not dared to hope for. A breakthrough had happened. Not just in the twins' room, but in their own. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen windows, casting pale golden stripes across the table. Lilian was already up, apron tied snug around her waist, humming softly as she mixed dough. She'd always loved morning stillness. It was when she felt closest to God, when prayer seemed to hang suspended in the air like breath. The twins sat at the table, squealing as she added a pinch of sugar to the dough. Are we helpin', Mama Lilian? Samuel asked proudly. You're helping beautifully, she said, guiding his little hands. Behind them she heard Caleb's quiet footsteps. He paused in the doorway. He didn't announce himself. He just stood there, watching. Watching the way Lilian's gentle hands guided the twins. Watching the soft morning light settle on her hair. Watching something inside his home that felt right. He cleared his throat to hide how long he'd been staring. Mornin', he murmured. Mornin', Papa, the twins yelled. Mornin', Caleb, Lilian said with that warm softness he was becoming addicted to. He sat slowly, removing his hat even though he didn't need to wear it indoors. I can help with chores after breakfast, she told him quietly, wiping flour from her fingers as she set biscuits in the oven. You've been carrying so much alone. Caleb shook his head stubbornly. I ain't expecting you to work like a ranch hand. Lilian turned, meeting his eyes. I didn't say I'd do everything. I said I'd help. There's a difference. Something flickered in his face, surprise, maybe admiration. Most folks offered pity or judgment. She offered partnership. Thank you, he said in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. The calf in the snow. Later that morning, the snow fell quiet and steady as Caleb saddled the horses for a ride out to the fields. One of the heifers was due any day, and he worried she might be struggling. I'll come with you, Lilian offered, tying her scarf. Caleb hesitated. It's cold and rough out there. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said gently. I want to. He caved. Fine. But stay close. The ride was slow, the wind sharp against their faces. The land was a wide, pale sea stretching to the horizon. Lilian felt tiny beneath the sky, but safe with Caleb riding beside her. When they reached the far pen, Caleb dismounted quickly. The heifer was on her side, breaths shallow and labored. Poor thing, Lilian whispered. Caleb worked fast, kneeling beside the animal to help reposition the calf. His muscles strained, breath puffing in clouds. Lilian knelt opposite him, holding the lantern, steadying herself on the frozen ground. Push, he grunted. She braced herself. Go ahead. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat coated Caleb's forehead despite the cold. The heifer moaned and Lilian whispered prayers under her breath. Then suddenly, a calf slid free into Caleb's arms. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time since she'd met him. A strong little fella, he exclaimed. Lilian laughed too, breathless with relief. You were incredible, Caleb said, looking straight into her eyes. Her cheeks warmed. I just held the lantern. No, he shook his head slowly. You stayed. Most wouldn't. Their eyes locked longer than either expected. The walk back, something new. The ride home took twice as long. The snow was deeper, the horses slower. When Caleb noticed Lilian shivering, he didn't hesitate. He slid closer and draped his heavy coat around her shoulders, the smell of cedar and smoke enveloping her. Caleb, you'll freeze, she said softly. I'll be fine, he replied. You're colder than I am. The wind howled, but the space between them warmed. She could feel the heat of him beside her, the firm line of his arm. Her breath hitched just a little, but she turned her face away so he wouldn't see. Caleb did see. And for the first time since Margaret died, his chest stirred in a way that frightened him, because it wasn't grief this time. It was hope. An unexpected moment of trust. Back home, while she removed her scarf, Caleb gently reached for her sleeve. You got a scratch, he murmured, brushing a thumb along her wrist. Her breath caught. He froze. They both realized how close they were standing, closer than they'd ever been. Quickly he stepped back. Sorry? Didn't mean to startle you. You didn't, she said, voice softer than she meant. He looked down at his boots. I'm still learning how to do this. A home, with someone else in it? So am I, she whispered. He nodded. We'll figure it out, together. A small fire, a big lesson. That evening, while Lilian reheated stew for supper, the stovepipe shook violently. A moment later a gust of soot burst out, scattering across the floor. The twins jumped. Lilian coughed. Caleb cursed under his breath and ran for the water bucket. I can fix the stove, Lilian said, rushing for a cloth. Just stay back, Caleb said sharply. I don't want you hurt. The sudden harshness made her flinch. Caleb froze. The children stared wide-eyed. The room fell silent. Caleb slowly lowered the bucket. I shouldn't be, snapped. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Lilian. She looked at him gently. You weren't protecting the stove, she said. You were protecting us. I understand. He blinked, caught off guard by her kindness. Most people resented his rough edges. Lilian saw through them. Still, he said, stepping closer, I was wrong. It's forgiven, she replied simply. We're a family. Families forgive. Those words struck him deep, deep enough that he had to turn away for a moment to steady himself. The night ends with peace. Later, as the twins slept and Lilian finished tidying the kitchen, Caleb stood in the doorway, hat in hand. He cleared his throat. Today, you made this place feel alive again. Lilian's heart fluttered. I'm glad, she whispered. I can't explain it, Caleb said, voice low, but I'm beginning to believe the Lord sent you at the exact moment we needed you. Their eyes met. Not with fear. Not with uncertainty. But with something tender, something warm, something growing. A seed of love beginning to take root. Not forced. Not rushed. But real. Winter melted slowly into the gentler days of spring, when the thawed earth smelled like new beginnings. Lilian's steps had grown slower, her breaths occasionally shorter, one hand always resting protectively over her swelling belly. The twins had started calling the unborn baby, "our new sister," though no one knew for sure. Caleb worked harder than ever, mending fences, building a new chicken coop, painting the porch rails, all while stealing glances at Lilian that he pretended were casual. But something deep was shifting. He had stopped calling her Miss Lilian. He now said her name softly, as if it carried weight, as if it mattered. And Lilian, she found her heart betraying her resolve more often than she'd admit. Every time he gently lifted the twins so she wouldn't strain herself, every time he insisted she rest while he prepared supper, every time he knelt by her chair at night to pray with her, something inside her warmed painfully. She had not been loved in years. Maybe not ever. But God was teaching her to receive tenderness without fear. One quiet night. It was on a cool May evening after the twins had been put to bed, that the first sharp pain hit Lilian. She gripped the edge of the chair, breathing hard. Caleb instantly knelt beside her. "Is it time?" he whispered, eyes wide. I think so," she managed. The storm outside grumbled low. Thunder rolled across the plains and a cold wind swept under the door as if trying to warn them. Caleb's hands shook slightly as he helped her to the bedroom. "I'll fetch Miss Abigail, she's the midwife." But the moment he opened the door, the wind tore it from his grasp, slamming it against the wall. Rain fell in sheets. Lightning fractured the sky. "You can't go out in that," Lilian gasped. Caleb hesitated only a moment before shutting the door firmly. "Then I'm staying here. I'm not leaving you." He paced the room once, twice, scrubbing his hands through his hair. Finally he met her gaze. "Tell me what to do." She breathed through another contraction. "Water, towels, and pray." They prayed together first. Knees touching the rough wooden floor, his hand trembling around hers, Caleb whispered, "Lord, please help her. Help this little one come safely. Give me strength to do what needs doing. I can't lose her. Not either of them." Lilian's breath caught at his last words. Not lose her. When the contraction passed, Caleb rose with new resolve. Labor begins. Hours passed. The storm raged like a living thing. The twins woke once, frightened by the thunder, and Caleb carried them to the kitchen with a blanket, whispering stories until they slept again. He returned every few minutes to check on Lilian, who lay propped up on pillows, sweating and crying out softly. "You're doing so good," he kept saying. "I ain't leaving you for a second." When the pains grew stronger, Lilian squeezed his hand with such force he winced, but never pulled away. "Caleb, I'm afraid." "I know, but I'm right here." Another contraction racked her body. She buried her face in his shoulder. He held her close, murmuring prayers in her hair. Time blurred into a haze of pain, breath, and whispered scripture. "God is our refuge and strength. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. In labor she shall bring forth a heritage unto the Lord." Caleb spoke each verse as if offering water to a thirsty soul. The miracle arrives. Just before dawn, the storm finally quieted. A softness spread through the room, like the first light of God's mercy. "It's time," Lilian gasped, gripping Caleb's hand. He positioned himself exactly as she told him earlier, nerves shaking but faith steady. "You can do this," he assured her. "We can do this. Together." With one long agonizing push and a cry that tore through the early morning stillness, the baby slipped into Caleb's trembling hands. A tiny cry followed, a soft, beautiful sound. Caleb's breath broke. Oh, Lilian, she's perfect." "A girl?" Lilian whispered weakly. "A girl," he said, voice thick with awe. "A healthy, beautiful girl." He wrapped the baby in a warm blanket and placed her into Lilian's arms. Exhaustion washed over her, but joy, deep, holy joy, lit her face. Tears slipped down Caleb's cheeks as he watched mother and daughter. "She's ours," Lilian whispered. "Our gift from God." Caleb knelt beside her bed and pressed a trembling kiss to Lilian's forehead. "You gave me a home again," he said. "You gave the twins a mother. You gave me back hope, Lilian. I'll never forget what this night cost you." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. This family was God's plan, not mine. But his plans are always best. Caleb brushed a tear from her cheek, his thumb lingering longer than necessary. "I thank him for you," he murmured. In the soft dawn, with their newborn daughter nestled between them, Lilian felt it fully, finally. She belonged here. She was wanted. She was loved, even if the words hadn't been spoken yet. And the Turner family, once fractured by grief, began to heal under the warmth of a new morning. Summer settled over Willow Creek with warm breezes and long golden evenings. The stormy night of the baby's birth had already become part of local legend. Miss Abigail, the midwife, scolded Caleb for risking life and limb, but secretly admired the devotion she heard about. Even the pastor chuckled when Caleb sheepishly admitted he had helped deliver his own daughter. But the town still watched Lilian with wary curiosity. She wasn't Margaret, and some still reminded her of it with subtle glances or pointed remarks. But Lilian didn't bow under the weight anymore. She had a daughter now, tiny, soft, and beloved. The twins adored her. And Caleb, well, something had shifted inside his eyes. He sought Lilian out in quiet moments. Watched her as she rocked the baby. Listened when she prayed. Spoke her name with a softness that wasn't there before. Love had been growing in the cracks of old wounds, slowly, tenderly, like wildflowers pushing through broken earth. A new rhythm. Lilian's days filled with motherhood. Braiding the twins' hair. Teaching them Bible verses. Feeding the baby. Keeping the small, lively home warm with peace. And Caleb worked with renewed purpose, his steps lighter than before. One afternoon, he came in from the fields to find Lilian humming softly while nursing the baby. Sunlight spilled through the window, painting her in gold. He froze in the doorway, overwhelmed by an emotion he'd been trying to name for months. "Caleb?" she asked gently. He blinked, cleared his throat. "Sorry? Just taking in the sight." Lilian blushed. She looked down at the infant, pretending she hadn't heard the reverence in his voice. A quiet admission. That evening, after putting the children to bed, Caleb knocked on her door frame. "You have a minute?" he asked. Lilian nodded and set aside her sewing. He entered, removing his hat, something he hadn't done in this room since the night she arrived as a stranger on a train. "I've been doing some thinking," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "About this family God's built. About what we are now." She waited, heart thumping. "I didn't marry you for love," he said slowly. "And I reckon you didn't marry me for romance either. We made a promise out of need." He swallowed thickly. "But Lilian, somewhere along the way need turned into something else for me." Her breath caught. He stepped closer. "You've cared for the twins like they were your own. You've given this house laughter again. You brought our daughter into this world with courage I'll never forget." His voice grew thick. "You've shown me what a God-fearing woman looks like, and what a healed home feels like." Lilian's eyes filled. Caleb reached for her hand, hesitant, as if giving her a chance to pull away. She didn't. "Lilian, I've fallen in love with you," he confessed. "I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life building this home with you, not just as the mother of my children, but as my wife in every way. My partner. My blessing." Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet as rain. "Caleb," her voice trembled, "I've loved you for longer than I dared admit. I prayed God would turn this marriage into something more than duty. And He has." Relief washed over his face, pure, overwhelming relief. He pulled her gently into his arms. For the first time she leaned into him not out of fear or hesitancy, but out of love. The town gathering. A week later, Pastor Whitfield invited the Turner family to stand before the congregation. "We witnessed this marriage begin as a necessity," the pastor said kindly. "But God has taken two hearts, once broken in different ways, and knit them into a true covenant." Caleb stood straight, his arm around Lilian's waist. The twins clutched her skirt. The baby slept against her shoulder. Even Miss Clara Fielding wiped her eyes. Lilian wasn't Margaret. She had never been meant to be. She was Lilian Turner, chosen by God, chosen by Caleb, chosen by the children who clung to her with innocent trust. And this time the town didn't whisper with judgment. They whispered with awe. Forever after. That night, after the children were asleep and the crickets sang beneath the open window, Caleb reached for Lilian's hand. "Forever after?" he whispered, his forehead touching hers. She smiled through tender tears. "Forever," she breathed. Caleb kissed her, soft, reverent, full of promises fulfilled. The kind of kiss that sealed a covenant not made at a train station, but here in their home, in their hearts, in God's perfect timing. Their love was no longer born of desperation. It was born of restoration, redemption, grace. And as they held each other close beneath the quiet sweep of summer night, Lilian knew without a doubt. This was the family she had prayed for. This was the husband she had asked God to prepare her for. This was her forever after.